Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about hackers and if we need them. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, do you feel that hackers are useful as part of the development process, and do we really need hackers? Well, I think that is sort of like asking, do we really need police officers? Do we need soldiers? Things like that. Well, yeah, in a perfect world, then no, we don't. It's just that, well, unfortunately, we have people who want to do bad things to our software and our countries and our businesses and property and all that good stuff. So we sort of need someone to help us figure that out. But yes, in the world that I would very much like to live in, then no, we would not need any of this stuff. We would just write stuff and build things, own things, or whatever model we're using, right, and have no problems. But that's not the world we live in. So I believe that hackers are very necessary. I would say the value of the work that they do is just increasing by the year, maybe even the month. I don't know. Like the amount of dependencies, like the level of dependency that the world has on IT solutions at this point is ludicrous. We've gotten to the point where I even remember talking to an old boss of mine when they wanted to switch out the door at my job. They had this like app that would unlock the door for you. And in order for that to work, you needed to have the app installed, you needed to have like this encryption and etc, etc, and then the lock had to be like engaged and it had to have a network, etc, etc, right? And this was for a company with like, I think 20, 30 people maybe, and I asked, so why is this better than just having a key? Or like, a basic key card? And he said, yeah, no, but because I have like an in with that company, and like we believe in innovation, we want to support innovation. And I kind of go, but this basically means that if our router goes down, we're locked out of the office. That seems like a really bad idea. I really hope that if there's a fire, the fire respects the cord that connects the router, because otherwise we're all going to burn. Well, not that extreme, but I basically demanded that I want to have an option of doing a low-tech solution. And it's the same reason why we have elevators and stairs. Because unfortunately, sometimes being very, very high-tech is actually just something you do because you don't actually think about the problem that you are solving. You are simply on the bandwagon of doing things because it's popular rather than that you're using your brain. And that is what I think a hacker is very good at, to help us figure out when we've been stupid. So the way that I usually prefer to work with pen testers, which is the professional term, or like it's the term that I prefer to use for hackers, because hacker has like this. Unfortunately, when you deal with actual pen testers, you actually usually deal with real professionals, and hacker is something that people don't really, who are not really IT people, like that's a term that they use, and it's sort of for me the same thing as rockstar developer. What's a rockstar developer? I don't really know. I still don't know. But a lot of people like to refer to you as a rockstar developer if you're in the hiring process, or like when they're explaining who they're hiring or stuff like that. A lot of these tech terms don't mean all that much. It's just something that is being used. So the reason I like to work with pen testers is that the reality is that digital solutions are so complicated at this point that it is impossible for a single software developer to think about all the things that could possibly be going wrong. That's the reason why we have a QA. And to me, a pen tester is just a different type of flavor of a quality assurance person or a tester or something like that. It's simply that they have very specific knowledge of an area that most people don't. A different take on the role of a hacker could be a person who does accessibility testing. Because as you can imagine, if you're gonna make a website for, say, the government or something like that, and let's say that you have a bunch of developers who are really, really good at software development, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that they know everything about accessibility. Because the reality, guys, is that the area of what you have to know in order to produce an ever-growing, in terms of complexity, system, it's enormous. It's the reason why we have doctors, like we have different types of doctors or different types of health specialists who focus on different parts of the body, because the body is really that complicated. It's not possible to have one person who is a master of all of it. And to me, a pen tester is the same sort of beast as anyone who is a specialist within an area of IT, because you can specialize in many things. You can be a user experience specialist, or you can be, as I said, like accessibility. You can be an automation specialist. There are many niches, quote unquote, that are very useful to the digital systems that you're building. Now, the base unit, in terms of if we're talking about value, and that's why software developers are so required, like the lowest level is the software developer. In any digital solution, you need someone who builds the application, but there are so many supporting roles that can be useful depending on the type of system that you're building. For a small startup, just starting out, then no, it's not that useful to have, say, a hacker or a pen tester to be, on hands all the time, for example. That's not very useful. But that's also true for having like a Scrum Master or an accessibility tester or a product owner, or something, depending on the size of the company now, right? Because there are so many different roles, right? And you might not need all these specialists at that scale. But let's say that you have a mid-sized company. Well, then in a mid-sized company, depending on your needs for security, it might not be sane to have a hacker who is like, and I mean the same thing I argue for DevOps. Like, I think it's ridiculous that some companies really have this idea that we should have a DevOps person as part of the team as default. Yes, some cases that makes sense depending on the way that you structure your application, but you really have to think about it. It's the same thing with having a team designer. That's also a really popular thing. Have a designer, and I kind of go, why? Why would you have a designer in the team? Yeah, sure, it's useful that you have someone who sort of knows everybody and sort of can work with everybody, but at the same time, how are you going to keep that person occupied? Because the process of designing something does not take as long as the process of creating the code, which means that that same model is usually that you share that resource between a few teams, because otherwise you're going to pay a person to just kind of sit around and not be able to do anything until the coding is done, right? So you really have to think about that aspect as well. And for a hacker or like a pen tester, it's the same sort of deal. So in many cases in that scenario, it's better to just hire a consultant to do an evaluation, which is the common thing to do. You do like a security assessment of your system, get the list of things to fix, and then you send that to the developers and they fix it, and then you repeat that process until the pen tester doesn't have so much more input. And if you have like a really sophisticated, like you're working for this, I don't know, the secret police, or you're working for the military, or like where literally anything you change in the system could have massive consequences, then yes, you should have a hacker or a pen tester as part of your team, and they should be checking shit all the time, because they have to make sure that no one can penetrate the system. We haven't really reached that level yet in many cases. Not even the government in some cases are working at that level, but that is the future. I promise you that's the future, because the digital security of a nation or a company or whatever, it's getting to the point where having a strong technical understanding and having like a strong cyber warfare strategy is equal to having just another department of the military or the police or something like that. That is how dependent the world is becoming on digital solutions, and we need to account for that as part of our development process. But it's, as I said, it's like with security. You don't get like an entire legion of soldiers to guard the parking lot. You get a security guard. You have to get like a response that is appropriate for the situation. Have a great day.